My name is Ra. I am the data science manager at Chevron Phillips Chemical, and this is one of our engineers looking to the future state of AI driving our chemical plants. Okay, so I talk about generative AI a lot these days, and I usually begin the discussion with the utopian side of things. And so on the right-hand side is all of you guys thinking about all of the cool ways that you can use generative AI in your company, which is also me on the right-hand side. But, of course, you probably can't help escape some of the dystopian side of things. And we've kind of already talked about some of those dangers earlier. And this relates to hallucination driving some things directly in your control loop, which is what Immubit is trying to avoid by having direct control. So I don't think we're quite at the state of trusting ChatGPT to run critical safety loops at the moment. All right, what are we going to cover? I just want to set the stage here for how do we go about doing this stuff to set yourself up for success. And again, I'm speaking from the perspective of an enterprise company. Your mileage will vary, of course. What are some applications that you can use generative AI for in the more creative space? And then finally, where do we think we're going with this in the future? Okay, so again, unless you've been living under a rock, you're probably quite aware of the generative AI landscape, but this is where we're at now, and I keep having to update the month on this particular slide. But just to give you some context, and there's a reason why, the interface that we're probably most familiar with are the generative language models. So ChatGPT is the one that really kicked off the more recent craze. But of course, this is built on the GPT models. But of course, there are other text generation models, open source. And actually, I've put Bard up there, which has been killed off by Gemini, essentially. And Grok, someone earlier, I think it was Johnny, mentioning about essentially the exhaust of large language models. People were accusing Grok of being trained on OpenAI's Corpora because it was, or outputs, because it was saying, as an OpenAI model, trained by OpenAI. But it turns out that there is so much exhaust already that we're actually seeing that infect the corpus of training. There's a lot of image generation, very, very hot when Stable Diffusion essentially dropped, and DALL-E was early, and now DALL-E 3 is out and is actually quite good. I'm a Midjourney fan myself. There's a lot of really good stuff going on in audio, and I'm so excited about generative video. Anyone excited about Sora? See Sora drop? Anyone is? Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, that is where we're going. But 11 Labs is still the top of the line in terms of voice cloning, and we've sort of seen a lot of stuff in the news about people's voices being cloned, including the president. There's a lot of hybrid multimodal models coming out, and that is really going to expand this year. And so GPT-4V, GPT-4 was always had vision capabilities, but opening up the API. Gemini, I don't know if you caught the just truly native multimodal video capabilities are truly amazing. And of course, you're probably seeing every single tech company now offering a little bit of pixie fairy dust little icon there saying, yes, we have an assistant or a co-pilot and so on. So the question is, how do you separate out this huge amount of hype, which we've already talked about today, from actual productivity? So like I say, there's so many companies going, yes, we're an AI company too. But really, and the reason why I put that previous slide up is the actual foundation models are very few. The landscape isn't as broad as you're led to expect from all the vendors that are probably knocking on your door or sending to email inboxes which aren't being read, or in some of our cases, being read by GPT itself. So everything's got a co-pilot. If you're anything to do with Microsoft, suddenly everything is rebranded as Copilot. So there's a lot of businesses, including probably yours, is feeling a little bit of fear. Am I missing out? Is it the the hot person at high school kind of thing? Are they doing generative AI? Are we doing enough generative AI? So really, how do we actually separate out hype from productivity? Well, we're working in the energy space, and we're quite used to mechanized tools. So it can be very easy to buy into the AGI hyperbole, and I would definitely steer away from, especially vendors using highly anthropomorphized language, like it thinks or it reasons, because really, at the end of the day, just think of these things as tools, nothing more, nothing less. They don't reason like a person. It is really just a machine learning model. It is a pure subset of machine learning. Nothing more, nothing less. Yes, we can be fooled into thinking, okay, there is some task decomposition, but it turns out to be very thin. Few people now plow fields by hand. So it's still like a power tool like a nail gun. Okay, maybe it's more like a nail gun on steroids, but still, it's, generative AI is really just a power tool, and you should think of it like that. Don't get sucked into the AGI hyperbole. However, use the right tool for the right job. You wouldn't use a nail gun to make a Fabergé egg. Okay. So, yes, of course, there are dangers. You should know what those dangers are before just sort of jumping into the pool. I think Samsung is an early poster child of what not to do. We talked about coding assistants earlier. And Samsung demonstrated exactly what you should not do with using a large language model for coding. They now consider a whole swath of code no longer proprietary because it was essentially leaked. It was using a variant of based on the GPT model. There's been no near HIPAA violations in the wild. So there are definite dangers from just the fact that if you're not using an open source model, then you're using an API and the usual dangers with that. Bias. This is often not acknowledged as a massive danger, but there are 3 channels of bias that we experience with using large language models. And people often don't think of their own method of prompting as another source of bias. Not safe for work output, especially if you used earlier versions like raw GPT-3, back when that was the coolest thing, you would actually get suggestions that were not safe for life, let alone safe for work. So that is a big danger. If you have customer-facing applications, if you are Chevy and you sell a Tahoe for $1, that's probably not a good thing. If you're Air Canada and you're being sued because your chatbot gave the wrong advice, then this is a massive danger that it could be existential to your business. And of course, probably the most well-known risk is with hallucination. The model itself doesn't know it's hallucinating. Like I said before, these are just machine learning models. It doesn't know a ground truth. So that is something to be concerned about as well. How do you navigate these risks but take advantage of the productivity? Okay, so just an example, because this leads me into what kind of prompt you shouldn't use. Please briefly summarize Chevron Phillips Chemical's generative AI policy in a single paragraph. Yeah, okay, CP Chem's generative AI policy, ensure responsible. That's great. The policy focus. Yes, this is correct. This is amazing. But it was purely hallucinated. We didn't have a policy at this point in time. Just blurting it out, and it actually got most of the cases right because it was just very confident. But these things, I'm like, okay, maybe we should actually add this to our policy. Maybe it looked into the future and saw what we should have had. In which case, I'm all in. Okay, so this is what I call the HOF, high octane hallucination fuel. There are certain ways you can prompt models that would absolutely lead you to hallucinations. And that is asking for very, very specific things such as URLs. Hey, give me the URLs for this without it looking out at the web. If it's using a raw model, it won't know your specific URL. And that goes for scientific journals as well. Implying that the model should know about something that it doesn't. And that's what I did before. That was a sneaky technique I used there. Oh, of course you should have known about CP Chem's policy. Implying that, okay, well, it's just trying to work out the next few tokens. And in that case, it was like, oh, obviously I should have known about the policy. Not giving the LLM an out. This is a very common one. Always, and this is if it's more open response, always allow, oh, I don't know the answer to that, instead of forcing a response. And so this is all to set up a caveat for any of the examples I'm about to show you. In a creative context, at least, you should consider generative AI as a first draft only tool. You should always be able to verify and refine the output in the following examples I'm going to show you. Okay. All right. So the question is, I posed this before, how do you navigate between the risks and the opportunities that you see with generative AI? And so what we've done at CP Chem, we formed a generative AI task force. If I'm being honest, it was really just a reaction to security saying, shut it all down, like, burn it. And so we're like, no, there are really good things you can do with it. And so the key to the success of this task force is that it's cross-functional. So we have representation from legal, we have risk and compliance and security, but also importantly, organizational change management and communications. This is important. We're trying to manage this throughout the enterprise. So we need to manage how this changes how we do work. And this task force is responsible for the oversight and approval of generative AI applications. And so we have a well-defined risk assessment and approval process, first of all defined by a coherent policy. So if you don't have one, I recommend you do, and come and see me later if you want some tips on how we approached it. Key to the success of this is the education of your employees. Not everyone is as kind of well-versed as the people in this room. So I don't want someone down at the plant going, oh, this is the optimal mixture of catalyst that we should use in this massive loop system and so on. We also have a risk assessment process as well. So ask me later for some red teaming tips. But this allows us to experiment in a way that aligns with the other ways we do business without necessarily having that nail gun pointed directly at our foot. And the objectives of the policy is to inform users on risk, how we make decisions, and what each user's responsibilities and duties are. Okay, with all that being said, you've set yourselves up for success. Let's have some fun. But this is what I got early on. We're a tech company. We're a chemical company. Like, what do you need generative AI for? Yeah, right. So I'm like, come on, everywhere you look. HR, finance, safety critical, no. But yeah, it's like everywhere. But how do we manage these risks? Isn't this stuff expensive? Is there any kind of real business value? So I'm going to give you an example, and of course your mileage will absolutely vary. Does anyone develop in an agile way? Capital A, agile. Yep, a few nods here. Okay, so there's pros and cons. I'm still evaluating whether it's useful as a data science manager, whether this is useful. But it can be a little onerous to fully flesh out some of these endeavors. So the high level of unit of work we call an epic, and this is just the whole broad level vision. Okay, I want to do this really cool thing, and the users are going to be really amazed. But then we kind of need to decompose that into kind of more tractable units of work. So how do we go about building that epic? So we build up a feature, and this is a large portion of deliverable value, and it's usually somewhere between a month and a quarter. But then we need to decompose that further into multiple stories. And so the question is, can we use an LLM to at least elaborate these half-baked ideas that I have of bullet points and so on into something that we can actually tractably make use of at work? So can we formally structure these high-level ideas? Feel free to debate me later on the utility of Agile in AI, ML, AI. Okay, so here's an example of a prompt, and in this case I use the GPT playground. So you build GPTs and little customized versions of GPT. The prompt is, your Agile Epic bot, a bot designed to take a brief description of an Agile Epic and give the description and acceptance criteria. So this is the formalized kind of language that you want out from how you decompose this task. And also, in this case, I'm like, it doesn't actually matter. I'm not going to mention it's CP Chem. I'm not going to put a lot of CP Chem specific stuff. So I just said company X in here. Okay, an example. And I usually use few shot learning for this kind of stuff. I give an example of a really cool one that I really like, just to say, hey, this is a really good thing to do. So an example, let's make this meta. I'm going to cover Agile, hiring, and creating logos. So let's make an epic for that before we go on. I want to develop applications that exploit these, and the result is essentially the epic name, building generative AI applications, boosting. Okay, that's a bit loquacious, so I'll probably edit that. But like I said, this is a first draft tool, right? It would have taken me ages to just I would procrastinate, honestly. I'd just sit there and look at a blinking cursor on my screen. But at least this gives me something to get my teeth into. Importantly, what's in scope and what's out of scope, I have actually found that extremely valuable because there are again, just as a reasoning tool rather than, internal debate, I suppose, as to I hadn't even considered this edge case, and the thing's obviously just gone off on the wrong track. I'll just reprompt it. Then, the trick is continue this program on. So cascade down. Hey, Agile feature bot, Agile story bot, go all the way down. They'll never know. Okay, talent acquisition. All right, this is where you're probably starting to get a cold sweat. Are you using GPT to this is going to hit the news. CP Chem is using GPT to. No, we're not. Okay, at least not directly. So there are ways that you can use generative AI to screen resumes, but not in a kind of not in a hard way, but to be able to help just identify kind of issues you may not have thought of in a candidate pool. So once again, in big red letters here, do not use the LLM to directly screen candidates without verifying each. Remember, first draft tool, okay? Creating cover letters. Has anyone noticed who is involved with hiring, the volume and quality of cover letters have improved, or increased, I should say? Have you noticed that? I mean, we are getting hit with a few people would send a cover letter and it would be carefully crafted, dear sir, and blah, blah, blah. Now it's like, very, very long-winded, and I haven't yet seen a cover letter that says, as a model trained by OpenAI, but I expect it at some point. Okay, so how about screening resumes? So let's say you're going to hire an intern, and you have a job description. One thing you can do, and again, not using this to filter, or even really to rank, you actually don't believe the ranking. I did try kind of playing around with that, seeing if I could, we have a ranking system and so on, and I absolutely do not trust that with the GPT-4 level, which is, right now still kind of sugar the line. Put in the job description, and so for me, I'm like, okay, I want a candidate who's had a little bit of experience with ML ops, but they may not mention in their resume, they may not mention the key word like ML ops, but they may mention ML flow, something like that. And essentially, this is very useful for getting contextualization. And the key here, is anyone familiar with chain of thought prompting? Chain of thought? So ask your model to reason. And that is actually sometimes the most beneficial output is just, okay, how did you make that decision? And so that's also very effective. Safety. I did mention don't deploy this into a safety critical application. But the way that we manage safe operations is we have these tenets of operation at CPK. We have these 10 tenets of this is how you should operate. And but I can't remember what tenet number 5 is. But what I can do is feed those tenets to a generative model and then give a scenario. Hey, this scenario. So we had a contract cafe worker who got a shellfish allergy. Okay, what are the 3 tenets that apply to that? Always follow all safe environmental workwear. Okay, that sounds good. And give the reasoning. There we go. This tenet applies because the incident indicates that safe work practices may not have been properly followed, etc. So you can apply it to safety because humans are a huge component for safety. Code generation. We had a great discussion this morning about code generation, and Johnny, I love what Johnny focused on was testing. And this is where you can get a huge amount of value from, I like writing code. I hate running tests. I love having tests. What I have found very useful is, because I beta tested GitHub Copilot, the benefit I found was for very experienced developers already knowing what they were after, but specifically testing. So I was like, okay, now I can see some edge cases I wouldn't have considered before. Go ahead and build the code that accords with this test. So this is test-driven development. And large language models are actually really good at that as long as you seed them with a little bit of an idea of quality. What I am concerned with is junior developers who don't know the difference. So if they don't know what good code looks like, this is a danger. Okay, a little bit of fun here. For our internal team called Data Future, I generated 10 candidate logos. And this was actually pretty old school now. This was DALL-E 2 quite a while ago. So these were the candidates. Does anyone have a favorite? Any one of those? We ended up picking this one right here with the rocket going up to the right. And so that one was the letter D as an azure-colored rocket flying to the right with exhaust as ones and zeros and burning azure. This is really just the kind of really scratching the surface. Of course, just about every slide you saw in this presentation was generated by either Midjourney or DALL-E. And I personally, I'm not a graphic artist, but I find I can express myself just so much more richly by just going, oh, I'm about to talk about, a nail gun. Okay, well, can you give me like a really souped up nail gun? An over-the-top nail gun with an ammunition belt of nails nailing a timber house frame, high-end product photography, etc. So that's the prompt I would use in Midjourney for that. Okay, where are we going? So I haven't really talked about some of the non-creative, I guess, applications that we develop at CPChem, but I think we're seeing everywhere a lot of retrieval augmented generation. In other words, I have this whole bunch of unstructured data. How do I put that in a way that can be accessible from a model, to be able to get a semantic search, to be able to use that for contextualization that an LLM can then interpret. So we're seeing a lot of that. We are going to, and this is what we're experiencing, but we are by far from the only one, is that governance of unstructured data is going to be a huge pain point, also a growth area. Suddenly we're finding value in unstructured data that we couldn't even comprehended before, and this is kind of the true value of even the current generation of LLMs. But looking forward to future generations, we're seeing massive ramp up not only in research but also productionization now of multimodal models. We're just seeing the beginning of that now, and we're really going to see that ramp up for the next few quarters. So getting context from images of assets, for example. Hey, here is the standard operating procedure for this asset. Here's a photo of its current state. Is there anything wrong with this? And you'll be amazed at how well, say, GPT-4v is good at contextualizing. Generative video applications, we're really starting to see the beginning of that, and that will exponentially drive down the cost of creation of video. You're going to see a whole lot of internal corporate, educational videos that can be built on demand. There will be an explosion of chat with your standard operating procedure style solutions relating back to that retrieval augmented generation I mentioned before. And there'll be niche applications where the interface will change in terms of you can now richly interface using audio and also video. And so that will occupy certain niche applications. Okay, and with that, any questions?